is we won't listen really 100%. What we'll do is take what we already believe and reinforce it, and we'll kind of let the other stuff go by. Well, I don't have to do that stuff. We don't want to wholly enter into anything, fully I should say, enter into anything. This is a real problem. This not knowing involves wholly entering into things, fully entering into things and finding out through the process of experience, not through the process of intellectually knowing what something is. The taste of an orange, right? We taste the orange. We fully commit to the taste of the orange. We don't have to have an idea about what an orange tastes like in order to taste it. We just taste it. Just do it. Just taste, right? It's like that with everything. There's some interesting commentary associated with this that I like too. Non-Quan was translated into Japanese as Nansen, and he appears in some koans that some of you might be familiar with. Nansen said, "The way is not in knowing or in not knowing. Knowing is false consciousness, not knowing is indifference." So there's even differences in not knowing, right? There's knowing, which is thinking we know. There's not knowing, which is blankness, right? And then there's going beyond knowing and not knowing, which is what Zen is about, which is just really experience. That's what experience is. It says here, "Now when people hear it is said that not knowing is nearest, and that this is where Fayan was enlightened, they immediately go over to just not knowing, not understanding just this is it." Just this is it. In other words, this very moment, our very moment experience right here, right now, is it. The one word knowing, quote unquote, is a gate of myriad wonders. Just affirm totally when affirming, but don't settle down in affirmation. Deny totally when denying, but don't settle down in denial. One old master said, "In walking and sitting, just hold to the moment before thought arises. Look into it and you'll see not seeing. And then put it to one side." When you direct your effort like this, rest does not interfere with meditation study. Meditation study does not interfere with rest. Interesting, huh? Going along with the high, along with the low, it levels itself. See, this refers to, again, releasing the hold that the ego has. Just let it level itself. You know, the ego doesn't have to get involved in the clouds moving through the sky. The ego doesn't have to get involved in water flowing. It just flows. It's the natural function of water to flow and fill in everything, right? Don't have to engage in directing the flow. It just happens. Don't have to engage in moving clouds around in the sky. They just move. Plants just grow. You can provide the opportunity for a plant to grow by fertilizing it, watering it, and all that, but you can't force it to grow. That growing happens spontaneously, happens naturally. Not knowing. So as a practice, we can use this as a practice. I personally use it as a practice. I experiment with this all the time. When I enter into a situation, I look at how much am I bringing into this? How much do I think I know? What do I think is going to happen? Always I have an idea of what's going to happen. I was just sitting here this morning thinking about something I'm going to be doing later on today, thinking that it was going to be a certain way, and that I was then going to make a decision based on how that was, that's going to influence a lot of other things. But then I realized, what am I doing? especially since I was going to do this talk later on not knowing. You see how pervasive this is? Even when you've been doing it for decades, it's still there. So then I dropped it. And I realized when I dropped it that my whole body felt different. That there was tension I was creating in my body over thinking and worrying about what was going to happen later, which is a total, absolute delusion and fantasy for me right now, because I have no clue what's going to happen later. I have ideas, I have projections, but it may not happen like that. In fact, very likely it will not. More likely than not. So why do I have to know? I don't. And I'll be a lot happier if I just go and do the thing I'm going to be doing later. If I make it there, I might not. As we saw yesterday with the car crashing out here. Might not make it down there, so it may all be a moot point. Might have a heart attack on the way, you know. Oh, could happen.
Right.
Could happen. I know, yeah, we don't like thinking about it, but it could. We didn't like thinking about the bus crashing, but there was a crash a few minutes later. So we don't like thinking about this stuff, but it is possible. It just reinforces the fact that we do not know. I don't know that I'll make it to where I'm going. And if I do, it's very unlikely it'll be how I'm projecting it now. So why project in the first place? Why spend all the energy to do it? Why not just go there and see what it's like and enjoy what I enjoy and get rid of what I don't like? Can't I do that? Can we do that? So I invite you to experiment with this and see what happens. Every time you're entering into a situation or a relationship or doing anything, this is where life can really teach us. Our life can teach us. Any situation we enter into, we can look at what am I carrying into this that is simply a delusion, that is simply a projection, that is simply a way that I think I know things are going to go. And how then is that influencing it? How then is that preventing me from fully experiencing a given moment with anybody or anything at any time? This is why the Buddha said that the average person sees the world as if they're upside down. Right? We're not normally seeing what is, we're seeing what we think. And we create what our experience is based on what we think, instead of what actually is. Any questions or comments about this? Yeah.
You know, when I go to the grocery store, it's always useful for me to project what I'm going to buy and walk in with a list, as opposed to just wandering around and I inevitably forget things. If I'm going to go on a trip, think about, well, what if it's going to rain? What's the balance on the true experience without any, walking through the rain without the umbrella or taking 15 trips to the Publix you don't need to take?
That's a good question.
I don't mind the rain, it's extra trips to Publix.
Yeah. That's a good question. So how do you find that out? What that balance is for you? The fact is, when we make that list, we don't know if we're going to make it to the store. We think we are. And we think they're going to have what we want when we get there, but sometimes Publix is out of things that I want. So then what? No, we're always planning. Of course, we're always planning, we're always organizing. There's nothing wrong with that. But is it real? See, if we see that it may not happen, they may be out of something, or we may not make it there. Well, I'll give you an example. The other day I'm riding along Babcock Street, and there's an accident, and traffic was slowed down. And, I thought I was going to just take a few minutes to get to the store, but instead it took 15 minutes. Now, if I'd been highly attached to my idea of how long it would take me, I would have gotten extremely upset, like the guy next to me in this one car flipped out and started screaming and yelling. And there was a time in my life I would have done the same thing. What would that have accomplished? What does that accomplish? 3 minutes later, the traffic started moving. It just creates suffering. So it's all a matter of what we're attached to, right? But that balance is something you have to find. Like, what is the balance for me?